Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
Andrei Piontkovsky is a Russian political journalist and a thorn in Vladimir Putin's side. His books and articles are aimed at debunking the president's popular image and his popularity. A popularity Piontkovsky puts down to his stranglehold on the media and what he calls constant lies being peddled by the Kremlin. But this writer is now warning of much graver consequences if Russia carries on down its current path. President Putin has long described the breakup of the Soviet Union as the greatest political catastrophe of the 20th century. Piontkovsky believes the annexation of the Crimea and the Russian military build-up on Ukraine's eastern border is just the beginning of a master plan to redress that catastrophe by bringing all Russian-speaking people back into the mother country. And he says Putin won't stop at Ukraine. Estonia and Lithuania will be next, and they are both members of NATO. The world order could quickly unravel. When this writer looks at Putin's foreign policy, he sees similarities with Hitler's policies, and Putin has a nuclear button. Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, Andrei Piontkovsky and his doomsday scenario if President Putin is not stopped. Andrei Piontkovsky, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera. I just first wanted to talk to you a little bit about modern Russia. Could you describe it as a democracy?
Well, certainly not. You remember that 15 years ago, when Putin came to power, he invented the term managed democracy. And since then, it has been becoming more and more managed. I would describe our political system as autocracy. It's not totalitarian regime, otherwise we wouldn't talk with you now in this hotel. It's
an autocracy, as you say, though, that allows you to speak out, and you have spoken out against Putin, against the Kremlin many times.
Yes, but you know, it's becoming more and more difficult to expose critical views about power.
Have you been under threat for speaking out? Could you be under threat, say, for talking to us now?
Well, I was charged, I have a privilege to be a first person charged with extremism in 2007, just for my books. And my trial went for 2 years, but I was acquitted completely. And it was a very small, but nevertheless a victory of freedom of speech.
But is political journalism, the sort of journalism that you do, the writing you do, is it a dangerous occupation in Russia today?
Well, you know that some outstanding journalists, by the way, mainly women, like Politkovskaya, Estemirova, and others, were murdered. The journalists in regions, in small towns, they are even more vulnerable. Most of them, many of them are imprisoned or also murdered, but these cases were not well known.
When somebody like Andrei Piontkovsky is killed, is murdered, does it change the way you write? Do you possibly self-censor at all with any concerns? I don't know for yourself, not just yourself, but for your friends, your family.
No, well, it's too late for me to indulge in self-censorship, because I wrote enough to be one of the first to be punished if they become to tackle this problem very seriously.
How much do you think there is a sort of gap between the Moscow intelligentsia, the people that are here that are writing about liberal views, and the rest of Greater Russia? Because Putin still does carry a huge weight, a huge support in Russia today.
It's a gap not so much between people. People are, well, basically the same over the country. It's a gap between availability of information for them. Because we, Muscovite, 60 or 70% got their news through internet. And 2/3 of the country got the information from to 4 state channels of TV. And I watched, as a professional, I watched our government TV during this Ukraine crisis. And the intensity of propaganda is just ferocious. I never remember of such intensity of lies and zombieing of people in the Soviet times.
Do you think this is what's behind the threat to curb access to the internet? Because certainly in countries around the world that have had revolution, they've relied, or they've possibly been provoked to do something because they've seen the rest of the world.
This is one of the lessons of Orange Revolution, Arab Spring, and Mr. Putin watched this process very intensively, and he got his main lesson, especially from Arab Spring, that he should stay at power forever, because he watched what happened to Mubarak, he watched what happened to Gaddafi, and he's made lesson never. And you know, not only Mr. Putin, but considerable part of Russian political elite, it's quite reasonable people, but nevertheless they sincerely believe, for example, that Arab Spring was instigated exclusively by Americans and exclusively and directed against us, against Russia. This is only first step. Egypt, then Libya, then Syria, then Russia. When I try to argue that there will never be in Egypt president more loyal to United States or Israel than Mubarak, well, they don't want to understand. They invented some another explanation that, well, American instigated it through Putin to house Arab vote and weaken Europe with getting oil from Arab. So these people live in different realities. They in this conspirology of Americans behind every act in the world. They just can't imagine that events in Egypt are driven by internal processes in this country.
On President Putin, you wrote a very successful book, another look into Putin's soul. What did you find as you delved into his soul?
Well, the same 3 big letters, K, G, and B. this is well, essence of his soul, including this sincere belief in conspiracy theory.
Is that almost makes him sound like a blunt instrument? Is he not more sophisticated than that in the way he leads?
Well, you know, tactically he's a rather smart guy. And, well, for example, during this Ukrainian event, his operation of annexation of Crimea, from the purely military point of view, was excellently and will be included in future textbooks. It was not a classical military operation. It was a special forces operation, what military experts define now as a hybrid war. War not only by military, but informational war, by using local insurrection.
You mentioned that a lot of this was also driven by a very efficient sort of PR campaign, if you like. But really, Putin has shown that he is strong. He moves forward for what he says are the best interests of the Russian speakers, the ethnic Russians. Then that really is respected by a lot of people in Greater Russia.
Putin is driven, as I already note, by one motivation, to stay in power forever. He can't deliver to population anything in material goods. And he wants to substitute this product by idealistic paradigm of Russia rising from the knees in gathering Russian lands. And in his definition, Russian lands is any land when ethnic Russian live. So he puts the ethnicity above the citizenship. He wants to protect, as he put it, not Russian citizen, but any Russian ethnic. It's very dangerous borrowing from Hitler ideology of 30s. In no way I compare Putin with Hitler. We are different country and different regime. But the similarity of this concept of ingathering of Russian vote is strikingly similar to Hitler's foreign policy in 30s, when he annexed Austria, then Sudets, then Danzig, and so it was even so striking. It was very difficult not to notice this similarity. That one of the leading Putin propaganda officers, Mr. Migranyan, put a concept of good Hitler and bad Hitler. He said until 1939, Hitler was good. He doing good things for his people. Well, implying that Putin now is imitating not Hitler, not bad Hitler, but good Hitler. It's very dangerous because it involves directly redrawing of state borders.
You'd say he wants to rule forever. Do you get this sense he thinks almost his position is ordained by some greater power?
His position, he was very comfortable with this great power. All of them, his colleagues in G8, they closed eyes on autocratic tendencies in Russia. He closed their eyes on the war in Georgia, and even now, during this Ukrainian crisis, the very first words of President of the United States Obama and General Secretary of NATO Rasmussen were that military intervention of United States and NATO is completely excluded. Completely excluded because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. And during this Geneva talk on Ukraine, actually the West offered Putin a deal. Okay, you annexed Crimea, we will maybe talk blah 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 about it, but de facto you got Crimea, and we are ready to go business as usual. But please don't incurse further into Ukraine.
You've written about what you called the 4 stages of Putinism, the 4th stage being the end of Putinism. What will bring the end to his era?
Well, first of all, his economic model doesn't work. Until now, the Western powers were ready to go business as usual and not intervene in any Putin action either inside country, Russia, or inside his supposed zone and influence in former Soviet Union. But but now they're introducing sanctions, and Putin was sincerely surprised why these people who were always were so conservative and he manipulated by them, why are now introducing really rather harming sanction. What they are very much concerned now, not so much about Ukraine itself, but of his ideology of ingathering of Russian land and resurrecting so-called Russian world. Because indispensable next step in this program will be both republics. Because Estonia has 1/3 of Russian-speaking population, Latvia has 1/2 of Russian-speaking population, and driven by this, his almost quasi-religious idea of of being messiah of Russian vote, Putin will try to repeat the same thing. For example, Narva, there is a city in Estonia which are 90% Russian. Let's imagine tomorrow, citizen of Narva passed a referendum for joining Russian vote.
So you really do think his master plan is what he talked about, the biggest tragedy in Russia or in the Soviet Union was the collapse of the Soviet Union. The master plan really is to bring it all back to the table.
He said the famous phrase that dismantling of Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of 20th century. He understands he will never take Soviet Union wholly, but he introduced this concept of Russian war. He won't take the land when there is a Russian speaking. It's very well, there's terrible lesson of Germany. There's terrible lesson of Yugoslavia. What happens in Yugoslavia? Milosevic also wanted not to restore Yugoslavia, but take from Croatia, take from Bosnia, the area with Serbs speaking population. But why this Putin exercise is more dangerous? Because we live in nuclear world. Imagine that tomorrow a citizen of Narva spoke about their desire to be part of Russian Federation, and he put his special forces or maybe tanks in Narva. What will be the reaction of the West? West can't say again Ukraine is not a member. Estonia is a member of NATO. Article 5 demands from the United States, France, Britain, for all members to defend Estonia. But to defend Estonia means to fight with nuclear power. Well, certainly, Russian army, conventional army, is weak, very weak in comparison with NATO. But this makes Putin's even more dangerous, because...
is he capable of going down that route?
Maybe he's not capable to push a nuclear button, but in minds of European politicians and ministers, all scenarios will be played. And they understand that if they liquidate the Putin forces in Estonia, what they can do technically, he may, next step, to push the button. Not all-out nuclear mutual suicide with United States, but, for example, just to destroy 2 European megapolis. And what will be the reaction of United States? A lot of people in the United States ask Americans, do you want to die for Narva? And Americans say, oh, we don't want to die for Narva. We don't know where Narva is. So this game, Hitler-like and Milosevic-like game of Putin is becoming more dangerous for Russia and for the world because of this nuclear element. That's why I think that, as I understand strategy of West, they want to stop here now in Ukraine by very tough economic sanction to discredit this idea of Russian vote, maybe to discredit Putin to such extent that he will be removed by his entourage, but not to allow this terrible situation for them when they should decide whether to fight or not to fight for Estonia.
We've talked a little bit about the financial implications as the markets react to what's going on in Ukraine. I just want to touch a little bit on his personal finances. There has been a lot of rumour, a lot of suggestion that he's amassed his own personal wealth somewhere outside of Russia. Do you believe this? Do you believe he's almost a crook, or is he an honest man?
Well, this is not, for me, it's not a matter of believing or not, it's a matter of knowing the fact. Well, all his cronies, all his very close friends from KGB, from St. Petersburg city office became billionaires, and they're at the top of Forbes list. You can imagine only two situations. He is a very kind person who lets his friends become billionaires, or he is involved in this action. Two most striking examples. His very close friend Timchenko, another his close friend, famous Abramovich. In 2003, Abramovich sold to Russian state his company Sivneft for $13.7 billion, an exorbitant price. And everybody understands that this just, as we in Russian call it, obshak, it's the pocket of Putin and Abramovich. Practically during famous Abramovich-Berezovsky trial in London, both of them confessed that their business was in very close cooperation, not only with Putin, but with former President Yeltsin. So it's a classical kleptocracy.
Is anybody capable of knocking Putin off his perch, off his throne?
Only by palace coup by his entourage. No wide democratic movement exists in this country. First, because it was harassed, many people arrested, and second, it will not enjoy any popular support now, because people are very fascinating by this program of ingathering of Russian. It's the same effect as Germany. Germans adored the Führer until they got a price of these adventures. The same in Russia, but I think many people, many persons in his entourage understand that this is a very dangerous curse for Russia, both economically, both politically. Isolation from West weaken us technologically and makes us hostage of Chinese. Because if West stop energy trade with Russia, all the trade will be the Chinese, and the only source for modern technology for us will be China. This is the second trade of technology. It's terrible choice for Russia, and you know, people who now frequently speak that we are returning to Cold War are wrong. We are returning to something more dangerous than Cold War, because during the Cold War, after Cuban crisis, when United States and Soviet Union came very near to the catastrophe, the American presidents and Russian first secretaries behaved very responsibly. They never blackmail each other with using nuclear weapons. And Putin's aggressive policy towards our neighbors, pursuing this target of gathering Russian aim, is actually de facto is blackmailing West. Because he knows that, yes, I am weak on conventional level, but if you try to stop me, I always can go to nuclear. It's very, very dangerous. And Stalin behaved in such way in the late months of his life, when he really planned the Third World War. But most of historians believed that he died, he was liquidated by Politburo members who understood the terrible consequences of this course.
Almost sounds like Ukraine really has played into Putin's hands. It's made him a stronger leader, at least in the eyes of the Russian people.
Yes, and in the same time expose him to very firm decisiveness of the West to stop him, because, well, they would have abandoned Ukraine, but they won't face terrible dilemma whether to protect or not members of North Atlantic, because not to protect means end of the NATO and of the United States as world power, and the West as a part of world history. And the protection it means very real danger of nuclear war.
Andrei Piontkovsky, very interesting to get your views. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.